Gracias. Iniciamos.
Thank you. Next, we go on to the three presentations. The first one is the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius of Loyola from the standpoint of Black Africa, a mystagogical initiation. This presentation will take place in Spanish, and it comes from MALULU, Jesuit, PhD in spiritual theology, a specialist in Ignatian spirituality, currently the director of the MANRESA Spiritual Center in the Kiwentza Kinshasa neighborhood in the Congo Democratic Republic. He's also director of the Revue Telema of Theology and Pastoral Creativity in Africa. He's the author of a series of publications on spirituality, theology, and religious current issues. His last book is Ignatius of Loyola and the Works of Mercy. I give the floor to MALULU.
Gracias a Sandra y gracias a los organizadores.
Thank you very much, Sandra, and thank you very much for the organizers of this symposium. And thank you to you all for listening. I was asked to share my impressions about the exercises from the African standpoint, and I would like to read the result of my research, to read to the point to which Sandra will say enough is enough, because we have the text. So I will just read, and maybe I will stick to the time, we'll see, because I have 9 pages. And 16 here because I have double inch line. We can read what a Congolese Jesuit said, Father Boca di Mpasilonde. For 30 years, Jesus was initiated into Jewish life before becoming the master of initiation, we know, fully equipped to reform with knowledge the traditions whose intricacies he mastered. He spoke with authority because he knew what he was talking about. Our contribution aims to address the perennial relevance of Ignatian mysticism, and in particular of the spiritual exercises, the soul of Ignatian spirituality, reading them in the context of the Black continent. The problem is to know how to use the Ignatian instrument adequately so that it may bear abundant and effective fruits in Africa. Let us formulate it in another way with questions. How can we adapt the exercises of St. Ignatius for Africa? With what African cultural key can we approach them to make them more relevant for the man and woman living in the African context? The mystagogical initiation will serve as a backdrop for our present reflection. It is a question of reading the spiritual exercise that the spiritual exercises produce in parallel with the rite of traditional African initiation, with the aim, firstly, of making this experience more eloquent and pertinent, and secondly, of proposing a new language adapted to make this spiritual mystagogical initiation effective. That is to say, a transformation of the person and a transformation of social reality. Indeed, as we know, the ignition method invites us to respect each person with her own culture, her own riches, and the tradition that has helped him or her to be what the person is. As a pedagogy of search and discernment, it also teaches us to discover the will and the ways of God where he calls each one with his past in the very heart of his life, in the people and the world that is his. Our reflection will consist of three parts: an approach to the traditional African initiation in order to grasp its intelligence, and the resumption of the experience of the exercises of St. Ignatius in the light of the initiation in order to take advantage of it, some proposals of appropriate language for the initiatory mystagogical process of the exercises in Africa today. Therefore, my aim is simple: to encourage those who give the exercises to get to know better those who make them, their story, their motivational imagery, their culture. And I would like to show that certain elements of Black African culture can be integrated as an adaptation to help people experience the exercises. Before advancing in this reflection, a methodological clarification is necessary. It should be noted that we are not going to explain the dynamics of the exercises. We assume that the participants in the symposiums are very familiar with them. We are going rather to expose the traditional initiation where one can take elements to help to expose the exercise well. Moreover, some might wonder, what traditional African initiation are we talking about in this work? Well, in fact, Africa is plural, and its cultures are as varied as they are diverse. So respecting this immense Africa, we adhere to Jacques Maquet's thesis, according to which there are transversal elements of Black African cultures which constitute a common denominator and which allows us to speak of African culture in singular or Africanity. Therefore, considering these a priori, we are content with the traditional African initiation of the Kikuyu in Kenya, the Dei and the Murum in Chad, the Hemba and the Babembe at the the Democratic Republic of Congo. So we have considered the coincidences and the almost identical structure of the initiation among these peoples of Black Africa. First point, an approach to understanding traditional African initiation. The meaning of traditional initiation in Africa. In contact with other cultures and Western modernity, Africa has lost many elements of its culture, and others have been devalued in practice, including the traditional initiation. Despite this state of affairs, traditional African initiation can well be related to the Christian mystagogical initiation offered by the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. Traditional African initiation can then help Africans who have become Christians to make the spiritual experience of the exercises to better live their faith in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who came among us. Well, to easily identify these elements of African initiation that can illuminate and assist the practice of spiritual exercises in the African way, it is important to understand the very meaning and scope of this Black African cultural practice. In traditional African society, there are various rites. There are, for instance, those marking birth, naming, marriage, reconciliation, sowing, harvesting, funerals. So, what is traditional African initiation? What is its true meaning? Initiation is the rite of passage from youth to adulthood, during which the young man or woman are educated in the identity of his or her own land and culture, with the knowledge, the values, way of life, and way of being of his or her people. It introduces the initiate to a way of understanding the world and behaving in it. It is a communal search for the transcendent. Robert Jolin defines it in these terms, and I quote, "Initiation consists of a series of operations carried out in a whole, the universe in which a society develops, and aimed at transforming it. The transformation essentially affects a part of the whole, the initiates." End of quote. Through initiation, the young person learns to solve the problems and conflicts of his age, her age. The person acquires a certain harmony that prepares her for adult responsibilities and makes her a full member of her society. She penetrates the person, therefore, in the totality of vital human activities, fishing, hunting, culture, daily life, as well as the great moments of community life and the secrets of living together with nature. Telluric and luminous powers, among others. Let's say then that the traditional African initiation is a true time of formation of apprenticeship through the ordeal of death and resurrection. It's also an introduction to the secrets of culture, to the wisdom of the life of the people to which the person belongs. In short, it is a true mystagogy, an initiation to the mysteries of participatory life with its ramifications from nature, the visible and invisible beings, to God, the supreme being. Essential structure of traditional African initiation. Well, after having reviewed the details of the different traditional initiation ceremonies in Africa, we are left with 4 important points that constitute, in our opinion, the fundamental structure of this rite. Choice of the place of initiation. Initiation is not done just anywhere. It requires a far-reaching preparation in terms of the choices to be made, the first of which is the choice of the place of location. This means the tree, the forest, the initiatory river. Among the Babembe of the Congo Democratic Republic, the place of initiation is called Lokoli, is the place in which it's the initiation field in which the experience takes place, determining the duration of the initiation stay. For the effectiveness of the initiation and its practices and teachings, and in accordance with traditions and customs, the time, the duration of the initiation and the appropriate season are determined. Among the Babembe, it lasts 5 months, and this takes place during the dry season to avoid the inconvenience of rain and other inclement weather. Among the Day of Chat, the place, date, and duration of this event, which resembles death by its surprising character, were unknown to the candidates for initiation. Let's talk now about the selection of the initiates and choice of the initiation master. There is usually a college of initiators coming from the different clans. However, depending on the round, each clan presents a main initiator who will be the initiation master. This latter must be a married man of good manners, able to educate the young. He will show mastery of the tribe's history, tradition, and folk wisdom. In addition to this designation of the teacher, the pupils must be selected. That is to say, the young people suitable, or at least judged suitable for initiation. The criteria for this selection vary according to custom. For example, among the Babembe, a young man capable of bringing the village the fruits of his hunting or fishing or even his fields is eligible for the experience because he's considered to be a brave, strong, and resistant person. The important thing here is to remember that the experience is not automatically open to everyone and that proof must be given that one will benefit from it. Which is the content of the initiation? Well, the initiation has a whole pre-established program. It includes rites, teachings, tests, and various practices aimed at the human, affective, and moral formation and training of young people who will become adults in society. Due attention is given to the knowledge of the tribe's history, ancestral tradition, customs, and the language of wisdom, proverbs, tales, myths, songs, riddles, etc. In addition to these well-distributed subjects, the initiate is also trained in physical endurance, secrecy, and discretion. Second point, to review, explain, or give the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius in the light of the initiation in order to take advantage of them. The spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius are a mystagogial rite because the experience leads to the depth or deepening of the mystery of God. Therefore, the experience will be more accessible to Africans if it is done in the manner of a traditional African initiation, which is also a mystagogical initiation. At least if we can take something from this culture to help provoke the spiritual experience with the exercises. We are not going to go through all the elements, but to give examples of things that can help. Let our intention in these lines be well understood. This is an attempt of new possibilities to enrich the practice of the Ignatian exercises through the contact with Africanity and its cultures. Some preliminary options for experience. Long before the experience itself begins, Master Ignatius determines the actors and the destiny of the spiritual enterprise he proposes. Therefore, it's necessary to select the master of initiation, the person giving the exercises, the one who explains to the other the way he should follow and the order he should follow. If there is a human teacher who initiates the other into the mysteries and the mystery, he's only an auxiliary of the inner teacher. In other words, according to the certain perspective of Black African Christology, the master of initiation per excellence is Jesus Christ. During the experience, the one who gives the exercises, the one who initiates, is in permanent contact with the retreatants, whom St. Ignatius calls the one who makes. Therefore, it's also necessary to make a choice of initiates or candidates for initiation, the one who receives the subject. In the case of Ignatius, the person had to be a believer with desire and determination, with capacity propitious to assume that spiritual experience. In other words, the mystagogical experience of the exercise are those, is the one done during 30 days. And it's a must that the candidate is selected according to his physical, psychic, spiritual, and intellectual capacities, so that those who have little strength are not made to carry a heavy burden. Once the candidates, the subjects, or the Ignatian initiatory experience have been identified, an ideal place must be found. So we need some criteria, and in general, you will benefit much more if you separate yourself from all your friends and acquaintances and from all earthly concerns. For example, by leaving the house in which you were living and taking another house or room to live as far away from it as possible, as the Ignatian exercises themselves tell. But let's start with the beginning. Let us begin with the principle and the foundation. This Ignatian piece introduces the retreatant into the dynamic center, the vital relationships with God, with himself, and with the cosmic community, purification of the past in order to assume it under the mercy of Christ, in order to live the present and determine a future in the footsteps of Jesus Christ. With the key of initiation, the principle and foundation puts the practitioner, the retreatant, in contact with the ecological reality, because with nature one praises God, with the trees, the forest, the river, etc. In fact, although Ignatius destined his booklet to the one who gives the spiritual exercises, the latter will not forget his role of transparency in order to put the candidate in immediate contact with the true master of initiation. This purification and assumption of one's past on the part of the retreatant takes place mainly during the first week of the spiritual exercises. In the case of Africa, this state would help to understand well the obstacles to development, personal transformation, and that of the social reality. Then from this point on, the whole of the second week and even the third and the fourth one are oriented to knowledge, imitation, and sequela Christi. Jesus is the model, and from his life we can draw values for the present life in order to be led to the Father, to change the personal and social life, to save his soul, as Ignatius will say. With initiatory key, one can enter well into contemplation of Christ as the head, the eternal King who loves everyone and commits himself to save everyone. Jesus as the ancestor or proto-ancestor, he who founded the traditions and values that are passed on from generation to generation in initiation, life, solidarity, respect for elders, a striving for life. But he is a special proto-ancestor, Jesus. He's more than a man due to his dual nature, and thus becomes the model of Black African moral life. It is said that the final contemplation of the Ignatian exercises is to attain love, since love has been present throughout salvation history and was manifested in the mysteries of Jesus, our life, love, which is the name of God, and becomes the torch that the initiate, the retreatant, will carry with him or her as a synthesis of all the values that an initiation can offer. That is to say, the African Christian initiate will be a man or woman of love in the great human society, and from his or her true and concrete love will flow the other values and virtues with which the social reality can be transformed. And I get to my last point, the third point, which is a proposal of appropriate language for the initiatory mystical process of the exercises in Africa today. The hypothesis of our research was that traditional African initiation calls to mind and could facilitate the mystagogical initiation that can be identified in the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. According to this assumption, although each initiatory journey has its own language, the language used by Ignatius has been appropriate and relevant to Christians and also to other lands, cultures, and times. The circumstances to which Ignatian spirituality pays great attention require, in our opinion, that in contact with Africa and its culture, language and symbols be adapted and relevant to facilitate the initiation and the spiritual experience of the exercises for Africans. Certainly, the Ignatian text has its own dynamics and style that must be respected in order for the method and content to be truly Ignatian. However, we think that certain images, certain expressions, and even the form of certain exercises deserve to be adapted for their relevance and for the great fruit expected from the exercises in Africa. Allow me to give an example. The parable that Ignatius places at the beginning of the meditation of the call of the temporal king, which helps to contemplate the life of the eternal king, will no doubt meet with resistance in a context where it's difficult to find a president or a personality. And to have a good preparation for the second part of meditation, it would be necessary to borrow other images from the same traditional or current African context. A typical example of a Black African parable that could help us to contemplate the life of Christ, the eternal king, would be an invitation from the customary king called Kiamfu among the Yaka of the Kawango in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The testimonies in our possession say that to this day, this traditional king has a very great power that mobilizes more than any state authority. In fact, if Kiamfu gives an order to the whole population, the whole population obeys out of respect, out of fear of reprisals, or of mystical consequences. Moreover, if a persecuted person enters the plot of the great customary chief Kayamfu, the person cannot be persecuted and expelled without the chief's approval. His plot, let's say, has even a kind of extraterritorial domain. And this is a story that can really stimulate and help the Black African practitioner, at least those of this culture or those who are close to this culture. That would be one important conclusion. But let's move on to another conclusion. In this study, our desire was, first of all, to recognize the relevance of the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola as an effective means to help souls to have a profound spiritual experience that can motivate them to transform social reality. Our effort then consisted in establishing a parallelism between this Ignatian instrument and the traditional African initiation. The second approach has allowed us to demonstrate that such a rapprochement between this element of Black African culture and this nucleus of Ignatian spirituality doubles the effectiveness of the latter, and on the other hand, offers it all the possibilities of facilitating the spiritual experience of which it is also the bearer in Black Africa. Why the paradigm of traditional initiation? Why this paradigm? Well, because it enhances personal and relational identity and helps to admire one's own culture that can find the gospel to assume the person and common history without falling into despair, and to find motivating images to embrace the present and to commit oneself to build a better future for all. May God grant that the intuition of the Ignatian mystic of respect for the circumstances of time, persons, cultures, and places may always be honored for the greater glory of God and the good of souls. Thank you.